Hi, and welcome to That Was the Week That Was, a quick look back at some of the most interesting news stories of week 33 of 2023. The world keeps hotting up, and once again, Vince McLeod of the Alternative Centre is here with me to offer his take on the state of the world. How are you doing today, Vince?
G'day, Bob, and g'day, Internet. I'm doing very well today. Things are starting to get a bit warmer in Nelson. I think this week we've seen the earliest possible signs of spring. It's been spring rain today. It's been raining very heavily like it was last spring. And I think we might be just getting out of winter now.
Oh, that's good news. Well, let's jump into our stories for today. Last week, 20,000 people were evacuated from Yellowknife in Canada because of wildfires, whilst fires in Hawaii, the deadliest fires in the US in 100 years, raged, killing hundreds of people. What is going on, Vince? We've seen several 100-year events so far this year. Are these fires a coincidence, or were they part of the bigger scenario that's changing our world?
I read just this week the latest paper by James Hansen, which is actually called "Oh No, What Now," which is quite a sobering title, but it lays out quite clearly the fact that we've probably already gone past the 1.5 degrees above baseline. That was the level that we're all trying to keep below, according to the Paris Accords. So I think that these fires, unfortunately, they're just a sign that we've overheated the planet, and now we're going to see a lot more of that kind of natural disaster. We're going to see a lot more fires, and we're going to see a lot more flooding in particular, a lot more droughts also. So things in some places are going to get tough, unfortunately.
Apparently, the Hawaii fires were both caused by faults on the electricity grid. But some people are suspecting deliberate sabotage and saying that all these wildfires are climate change false flags. Is this denial, Vince? Are people so afraid of climate change that they would rather believe in a government plot to increase taxes?
It's hard to believe, but it's true that people have actually gone around setting wildfires in the West specifically to try and increase hysteria around climate change. This has happened particularly in Greece recently. Climate activists have deliberately set wildfires in order to create the impression that global warming is about to destroy us all. Regarding taxes, part of the problem is that all the solutions currently offered for climate change are globalist ones. They basically all involve the nations giving up their power, giving up their wealth, giving up their control to some kind of globalist organization, which we're told is going to help us all cooperate in order to keep the temperatures down. So I'm afraid that there's a lot of scheming going along in the background, a lot of globalists who have hijacked the climate change issue in order to push through globalist totalitarianism. So I'm afraid it's another one of those issues, those scientific issues that have now become so politicized that it's almost impossible to know what the truth is.
Gosh, people are weird. Well, another rather strange interpretation on events last week happened in Argentina, where voters rejected the country's two main political parties, choosing instead a rock singing libertarian outsider in the race towards their presidential elections in October. But he was immediately branded as far right by the press. Is this a deliberate vilification, or is it just a reflection of how far the media has moved towards the left?
It's a bit of both. The real problem is that Malay is an outsider, and so he's going to be branded as far right. He's not really he's not far right in terms of he's not a national socialist. He's not a Nazi in any sense. He's really more of a free marketeer, like David Seymour is, who is more concerned about collectivism in general. Some people were thinking that he might end up like Pinochet, in that he comes to power and ends up chucking communists out of helicopters, which would be really interesting. But I don't think that's likely to happen. I don't think that his the opprobrium that he's getting is because the media has shifted to the left. I think it's more of a globalist thing. The media is globalist. and they don't like seeing outsiders to their comfortable two-party system.
Well, according to the article, and just a quick reminder that all these articles that we reference tonight can be found in the description below. The article says that some 90% of the ballots counted so far shows that the far right libertarian economist Javier Milei had 30.5% of the vote, far higher than predicted, with the main conservative opposition bloc behind on 28%, and the ruling Peronist coalition in third place on 27%. The way things are going here, it almost seems as if a three-way split like this is something that could happen in New Zealand in October. What do you think?
To my mind, the major difference between us and Argentina is that we don't have a young revolutionary like Malay. Malay, I'm not sure how old he is, but I think he's in his 40s, which is a lot younger than Winston Peters, and it's a lot younger than also Liz Gunn. So I think that the difference is that our revolutionaries, our politicians who are standing up against the establishment, they can't also bring in the youth vote. Malay has brought in the youth vote in Argentina who are upset with the difficulty in finding housing, the difficulty in affording to live nowadays. He's brought in a lot of discontent from voters concerned about that. Voters concerned about that sort of thing are less likely to vote New Zealand First, less likely to vote Liz Gunn. So I think we're not likely to see a alternative movement stand up in this particular election that could get 30% of the vote. Another characteristic is that in South America, there is an enormous amount of discontent with the politicians. People have extremely low expectations of them, and that means that alternatives can stand up a lot faster and get support a lot quicker. In New Zealand, the establishment still has a lot of support among the people. Maybe that's because the people are confused and deluded, but in any case, the establishment still has that support. So I think it'll be a while yet, at least another electoral cycle, before we see a revolutionary movement that can get 30% like Malay has done.
All right, well, moving now to Eastern Europe. The Ukraine offensive is about 2 months old now, and it's not looking good. A US intelligence assessment has predicted that Ukraine will fail to fulfill its main objective of severing Russia's land bridge to the Crimea. What's the story here, Vince?
The story is stalemate. The both sides have found that it's now too difficult to take over new territory. Russia has mined the territory that Ukraine is trying to take. They've mined it so severely that in some places there are 5 mines per square meter. So it's become impossible, effectively, for new offensive measures to realistically take more ground. That's not just true of Ukraine; that's true of Russia as well. So I think realistically, we've ended up with the World War I style stalemate here, and I don't see that changing in the short term.
Wow. Well, the article goes on to say that Biden has requested an additional $20.6 billion for the Ukraine aid, and also suggests that Ukraine could continue the counteroffensive through the winter. This looks like the conflict is settling in for the long haul then, doesn't it?
Looks like we're going to be here for years. I mean, let's not forget, it's the conflict has already dragged on for a year and a half now. February 2002, the invasion was launched. So we've already gone half as long as World War One, and I don't see things concluding anytime soon. The longer things go, the greater the advantage will be for the Ukrainian side, because the Russians had the initial advantage, but their economy is starting to falter now on account of the cost of the war, whereas Ukraine is supported by the entire West, basically the entire NATO. So they have many 50 times more resources backing them up ultimately. So the longer things go, the longer Ukraine will get the advantage. But I don't think that'll necessarily mean that they can push Russia out of Crimea, because the defensive fortifications are now so strongly built that I think we're just going to see a stalemate for years.
Well, let's come back to New Zealand and take a brief look at our politics. Winston Peters tweeted out news that it has been reported that Labour has silently tabled legislation to lower the voting age for local elections down to 16. Is there skullduggery afoot?
There's always skullduggery afoot. Unfortunately, we can't trust any of these mongrels. But as far as lowering the voting age to 16 is concerned, they can only do that, or they can only attempt to do that at the moment at local council level. They haven't tried to do that at national level, although I can guarantee that they will, because such moves are in place in other jurisdictions overseas. And it's well known that they would benefit Labor and the Greens. Labor and the Greens get by far a majority of the votes of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old voters. So if we added 16 and 17-year-old voters to the mix, it would definitely benefit the Greens and Labor, and they know that. So that's one reason why they're trying to expand the franchise.
That's interesting because, Vince, the younger generation is far more conservative than the millennials. I thought that it would be possible that lowering the voting age could backfire on Labour because the youngsters would vote for the more conservative parties if they were given the vote.
Youngsters are more conservative than millennials when it comes to social issues. They're less approving of things like LGBT. They're less approving of things like alcoholism and promiscuity, premarital sex, and so on. But the fact remains that young people have almost no chance of owning a home without inheritance. Unfortunately, and this is where things get really tricky, is that the Labor Party haven't done much to alleviate that situation in the 6 years they've had in power. And so people are really going to start casting about for alternatives. I don't think that the younger people are so much conservative as they are anti-establishment, and the establishment is liberal. So just by being anti-liberal, they may appear to be conservative, but I think they're really anti-establishment, and we'll see that when powerful revolutionary movements start cropping up in the West over the next 10 years.
NPR put out an interesting article about the question mark in the sky. Scientists say that the punctuation-shaped object appears to be two or more galaxies merging, but apparently it's not a hoax. Do you think maybe it's a message from the aliens asking us how we managed to mess up our planet so badly that we need to look for a new one?
I'm sure that if there were aliens watching, they'd be wondering what on earth that we think we're doing on this planet. We certainly don't seem to be making much sense of things. But what I think that comes down to ultimately is that the universe is so big that if you have a powerful telescope and can see deeply into the universe, you can see basically anything you can imagine. There's just about an infinitude of different shapes and formations out there. So I think realistically, you could see just about anything. I wouldn't be surprised if there were all sorts of symbols in the sky if you just look at the right place.
How weird. Well, that's all we have time for tonight. So thank you to all our viewers for joining us again. And please remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks, Vince, once again for your insight and input. And man, oh man, what a week that was.
Yep. Cheers, Bob. Cheers, Internet. Thanks for being with us tonight. And it was a crazy week. I think it's going to get crazier still. Things just keep on getting more and more intense. So stay tuned next week, folks.
The alt centre are clown world's good guys. They don't fit into boxes neatly enough to be someone else's tools.